He's known as the king of beasts, and he's shown up as a spiritual symbol since humanity began, from ancient gods and goddesses to medieval heraldry to even the present day. If you have had lion coming forward in dreams or just showing up in places, just seeing him everywhere, or if you've always been attracted to lion, or maybe you're even afraid of him, lion almost certainly has some medicine for you. My name is Ona Christie, and today I invite you to take a deep dive with me into the spiritual meaning of lion. You've probably heard of the lion spoken of as the king of beasts or the king of the jungle. The reason they're called this is because of their size, their huge size, and their ferocity. They are an apex predator, which means that nothing else hunts the lion routinely except for humans sometimes. And they're also a keystone predator, which means that if you take the lion out, it kind of disrupts the entire ecosystem. So the lion is the second largest member of the cat family or the Felidae family. And today we find them in Africa and India, but historically they ranged well into Europe and Western Asia, even well into Siberia. And in prehistoric times, there were even lions in North America. So they're a pretty almost universal animal. And in terms of a spirit animal, they cover a large area. Typically, lions are found in grassland or savanna habitats. They really aren't found in the deep jungle, and they hunt large game. In Africa, its preferred prey are antelope and zebra, but the Asiatic lion hunts primarily antelope and deer, but it will also prey on cattle and pigs. And so let's go back to that name, the king of beasts. The lion really embodies the king archetype. So anytime this animal is showing up, you can really feel into that presence of the king. And it can help to awaken the king within you, or it will show up if there's some kind of kingly presence about to come into your life, or if you are awakening that divine masculine, royal, kingly presence within yourself. So, what is a king, right? There's a number of characteristics that we associate with kings. And I think the one that comes forward the strongest for lion in particular is courage, right? It's that huge, huge spiritual meaning of lion that I'm sure everyone is aware of. So much so that when somebody is exceptionally brave and determined, we say that they are lion-hearted. And we'll get into that heart association again here, but I just want to go through a few more of these characteristics of the king. Nobility, right? The noble nature, the virtuous nature, the idea of the power and strength and being a protective presence, the characteristic roar or the voice of authority, making yourself heard, and not just heard, but respected, right? So that idea of being a respectful presence. And the idea of sovereignty, right? What is a sovereign? A sovereign, of course, refers to the king or the queen, but it talks about like there's no one ranking higher. And that speaks to self ownership, self dominion, which can entail things like self mastery, right? The mastery over one's animal nature or one's emotional self, and also just literally the idea of being a free man or woman, a free person, right? That whole idea of sovereignty is wrapped up in the king archetype. Okay, so lion is a cat. It's one of the big cats, but it has a number of traits that are very, very different from other cats. One is that it lives in family groups of 10 to 20 individuals, and these are called prides. So we can really look at pride being another meaning of lion. And of course, pride can manifest in both positive or negative ways, right? A certain amount of pride of self is an important thing, right? Because it helps us to treat ourselves with respect and hopefully others as well. And there's where the negative meaning of pride is if you only think about yourself and don't treat other people and the environment around you with respect, of course, that is a very negative meaning of pride, or just thinking that you are invincible, where nobody is, right? We all have vulnerabilities, or just kind of a self-importance, right? So one has to be really aware with this archetype of just that humility aspect. And that humility is this counterbalance to pride. And especially if you have strong lion energy, you probably have a lot of strengths and a lot of things to literally really be proud of in a good way. But one has to be really aware of one's weaknesses as well, and of not making oneself more important than other people, right? And it is a little tricky because a king is the highest on the hierarchy, but traditionally a king would be the one that looks out for everybody in the kingdom, even the lowest ranking person. So it's just kind of being aware of the really light aspect of Lion as somebody who knows what he can be proud of, but doesn't put himself above others in value. Right. And that brings us back to that heart idea tied to courage, right? Tied to being lion-hearted. And it's not just the courage and the bravery, but it's that association with the heart and the heart chakra, the big-heartedness. So that's a really, really important thing for this totem that actually really distinguishes it from most other predator power animals, right? It's that really activated heart, which can include like compassion, but also gratitude. Remember that story of Androcles and the lion? If you're not familiar with it, Androcles was a Roman slave, and he ran away and he found a cave to hide in. But as he was hiding there, a lion comes in. Of course, he's absolutely frightened, but then he realizes that the lion has a long thorn stuck in his paw. And so Androcles had the courage, right, to go approach the lion and to have compassion for him and to pull out that thorn. And then later on, Androcles was captured again and ended up being thrown to the lions. Well, what happened when he was thrown to the lions is the lion comes raging out the door and it recognizes him. It's the same lion and it spares him and it starts purring around him. And so the emperor sees this and he's astounded and he calls Androcles to him. And Androcles tells him the story, and the emperor's heart is touched and he sets them both free. So it's just that power of the heart that is really associated with lion. Okay, so back to the pride, back to this social dynamic of lion. It's the social hierarchy that's really, really important to lions because, like other social predators, they have to have this kind of hierarchy so everybody knows their place in the group, so that they don't tear each other apart, right? There's hierarchy, there's respect involved, there's knowing the law, right? All these things. And it's also really important for the king archetype because the king doesn't live in isolation, real different from like a lone wolf or a lone predator like a tiger, right? A tiger really is like the king of the jungle, but he doesn't have that social aspect to him. He's more of an individualist, right? The king is very much tied in the social order. Okay, so another characteristic of lion that's different from other cats is that they're diurnal. They're more active in the daytime, okay? And they also have this big long mane. The males have this big long mane around their head and down their chest. And with their tawny gold color and combined with their diurnal habit, this makes them an ultimate solar archetype, okay? So in addition to being the king, he's associated with the sun, and lion has throughout history been associated with these two things, okay? So this really opens up a lot in terms of spiritual meaning because there's a whole line of sun gods that show up in traditions all over the world. Okay, so lion as an archetype, it draws on that whole sun god and also sun goddess. We'll talk about that in a sec. These solar god and goddess archetypes. So some of the sun gods that have been associated with lion, one of them is Mithra, the Middle Eastern sun god, and then there is the Lion of Judah. So the Lion of Judah has its roots in the Jewish tradition, and it's the symbol of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so this number 12 and the number 144 that's associated with it, also numbers that are really closely aligned to ascension. These are also associated with the lion. So as one of the 12 tribes, the Lion of Judah is the symbol of the tribe of Judah. And there's a story in the book of Genesis about Judah, and this connects directly with the lion's spiritual meaning. Judah was one of the brothers of Joseph, the famous biblical character who was betrayed by his brothers. Joseph, if you remember the biblical story, had been kind of sold into slavery to Egypt, and he became a trusted advisor to the Pharaoh, right? And then he became a wealthy man. So his brothers fell into hard times, and they came to him, not knowing he was their brother, just asking for mercy, asking for jobs or whatever, so that they could survive. And Joseph kind of got his revenge at them and he just wanted to teach them a lesson. It wasn't like he was being revengeful, but he wanted to really get his point across. So he framed his youngest brother, Benjamin, by hiding a goblet in Benjamin's satchel and then accusing him of stealing it. And the punishment for the thievery was to be taken as a slave to Joseph, right? So Judah, who was the brother of both of them, stood forward, and he still didn't know who Joseph was, but he volunteered to go in Benjamin's place, right? This was a really, really kingly action, right? So he took on this symbol of the lion, and this also draws on the spiritual meaning of lion as loyalty, generosity, selflessness, and also taking responsibility for others, especially those who do not have authority, right? Because the youngest brother would have the least authority. Okay, so really standing up for the underdog, standing up for those who don't have the power to speak for themselves, big part of this whole archetype of the lion. And of course, they are also fitting for that king archetype. Okay. And the Lion of Judah has its roots in the Jewish tradition, but it's also tied up in Christianity. And the lion is very, very much associated with Christ. If you're familiar with the Narnia books, you probably know about the great lion hero of those stories, Aslan, and that he symbolized Jesus Christ. And Christ also is referred to in the book of Revelations as the Lion of Judah, right? And he is supposed to bring divine retribution during the end times. So calling on this Christ archetype, again, often associated with the sun, and this is the illuminated higher self. This is the ascended self. Okay, so lion, super, super powerful archetype, right? And especially if anybody who is on the ascension path, lion is a very, very powerful totem. So the lion also appears in many other places in the Bible and in Jewish and Christian stories and myth, but let's just move on to Hinduism. The lion also appears here, and the god Narasimha is an incarnation of Vishnu, the preserver, and he appears as half lion, half man. He is also known as the destroyer of evil and also as the great protector. And these are two very important aspects of lion symbolism, destroying the evil and the great protector, also associated with kingship. So if lion is your spirit animal, you'll probably find it to be an extremely protective one. In Hinduism also, the Hindu gods and goddesses, typically they'll all have a vehicle or an animal that they ride. And one of the goddesses is the great mother goddess Durga, and she is often portrayed as riding on a lion. So sometimes it's a tiger, but often it is a lion. And so she's this very, very powerful female goddess that is associated with the lion. And the lion god appears in feminine form elsewhere as well, most notably in ancient Egypt as the goddess Sekhmet. Sekhmet was a solar goddess and said to be the daughter of the sun god Ra. And she was believed to be the protector of the pharaohs and a great warrior, as well as a healer. But she had a dark side too, which we'll discuss in a little bit. So, speaking of goddesses versus gods, let's take a look at one more unique characteristic of lions that's different from any other cat, and that we mentioned the mane before. Lions are sexually dimorphic, and that means that the male and female lions look very different from each other. Okay. And they also have very, very different roles within the community or the pride of lions. So, what's the spiritual meaning of lioness versus lion? It's important to note that it's the female lions that do most of the hunting, right? So if lioness shows up, it could be a sign to be assertive and proactive about going after what you want. And especially the things that you need to support yourself or your family, things like a better paying job or a better house or a car, or if you're in business, she could be showing up to encourage you to confidently go after new clients or customers or go after that promotion, right? And don't think small here. Remember, lions go after the big game. So it can be an encouragement to think big when you're kind of dreaming what your life wants to look like. Think big. But keep in mind too that the lioness doesn't do her hunting alone. She might sometimes. Sometimes they do go after smaller prey, but typically the bulk of the food that they consume is going to be the big prey. And when it comes to the big prey that is their staple diet, they coordinate and they hunt as a pack. And they will adapt their hunting strategy to different prey and the different conditions that they might be dealing with. So whatever the situation, lion or lioness, in either of them, they can run fast, but they can't keep it up for very long. So they have to figure out how to get close to the prey and take it down quickly. And this is a super powerful lesson too, especially if you're in business or aiming for a promotion. It's like, don't waste time, right? Figure out who your allies are and enlist them to help in ways that are going to benefit all of you. And then be super strategic. Okay. When they're working as a group, they work in ways that really maximize efficiency so that they can take the animal down with the least amount of energy expended. Okay. So planning ahead, planning smart, right? Doing smart work instead of hard work, that would be part of lion and especially lioness energy. Okay. To focus on the outcome, avoid distractions, and avoid spending more time or energy than you need to get the job done. And there's maybe a good chance if lioness is showing up that there may be strong feminine energy at work here. Women may play a top role in your partnerships here, or possibly you may want to look at strategies that are a little bit more feminine in nature, such as social networking. Okay, so let's talk about some behaviors of lion that you might find less appetizing. We can call this the shadow side of lion. And if lion is showing up for you, it could also be pointing out some things that you might not want to see about yourself or your situation. But keep in mind that shadow totem medicine can be really super powerful. If you're willing to really look at things honestly, it can point to exactly where you need to work on yourself or most need to bring in some light. And if you do, you may find that you take those shadow traits and use them in ways that are positive. And keep in mind that when shadow totems show up, it can often really point to things within yourself. If you've worked on yourself a lot, they may be things that are showing up outside yourself in other people, right? Or even if you're just starting to work on yourself, it may be showing up, or you may not even see it in yourself. You might be seeing it in other people. So just kind of really look at this section as even if it's showing up in other people, it may be reflecting something in yourself, or it may be reflecting like the opposite kind of characteristics in yourself that maybe need to be bolstered up. Like for instance, if you're feeling like things are beating up on you a lot, the lion could be showing up as, you haven't developed that kind of lion within yourself, that you need to do that. Or you might want to look at, if you are already a confident and powerful person, you may want to, or even in like an aspect of your life, if you have that confidence, you may have to look at, okay, maybe am I overdoing that? Right? Lion has a lot of fire energy. So, am I burning up? Am I burning bridges? Am I burning through things in ways that aren't constructive? Okay, so we saw the positive side of lion as a protector and a warrior, keep in mind that the lion is a predator, and not just any predator, it's at the top of the food chain. So there's a certain amount of ruthlessness and bloodthirstiness that are part of lion symbolism, okay, that we don't always want to see. Um, do be aware that this aspect can go overboard when there's a lot of lion energy present, and it can even degrade into violence or savagery. So lions showing up can sometimes be a warning to temper any judgment you may have of yourself and or others with compassion, right? Being overly judgmental or just not bringing compassion, even if somebody, you know, really needs to face consequences, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to condemn them, till judgment day, right? We can see them with compassion, and even if we need to kind of bring down the law, we can still do it recognizing their humanity, that they are a human being, right? So remember to be lion-hearted and not abuse our power, right? How do lions themselves counteract their bloodthirsty nature, right? Here's something to think about. If you are finding that this overabundance of the fire energy or this ruthlessness or condemning kind of energy is coming forward, two important behaviors to help release tense or aggressive energy are play and affection. And lions purr just like cats, and they can be very affectionate with each other. And this really helps to diffuse this. You can actually use these techniques proactively, right? Gratitude, being proactively grateful, being proactively just playful, and also giving just little appreciations, right? This little affection. If you're with your spouse, remember to hug each other. Remember to, kiss your spouse goodbye for the day and kiss them when you come back, these little affectionate gestures. Or if it's a child, just like little words of affection can go a long way. Softening, especially if you're in a position where you're a teacher or a mentor or a boss, where you need to give criticism, just tempering it with a little bit of positivity as well. Okay, so again, back to hierarchy. There are hierarchies within and between groups of lions, and every lion must be aware of and respect the rules. So with that in mind, the concepts of honor and lawfulness are very important to the spiritual meaning of lion. If you're not familiar with spiritual law, the lion spirit animal could be showing up to suggest that you might benefit from studying the laws of the universe. And if this is something you resonate with, you might want to check out my spiritual law playlist next. So going back to this idea of abuse of power, associated with that, connected with that, is the concept of excessive consumption or going on a rampage, which could take the form of gluttony, of sexual excess, intoxication, bloodlust, land grabs, that kind of thing, or uncontrolled destructive rage. Any of these things, right, can be part of that shadow side of lion. So we see these traits very often in the lion gods and goddesses. Sekhmet is a really good example. In one story, Ra sent Sekhmet to Earth to destroy his mortal enemies, and she was really effective at that. But she became so filled with bloodlust that she couldn't stop once the battle was over, and she nearly destroyed all humanity. This is really, really very similar to the goddess Kali, right? In Hindu myth. Okay, so Sekhmet was only stopped when Ra dyed a vat of beer red, and he poured it out in front of her. She thought it was blood, and she drank it all up and passed out in an inebriated stupor, and thus saving humankind. Right? So really, really powerful stuff, and sort of dark, powerful stuff, right? But the male lion can also show up in destructive ways, especially when it comes to family, right? And who could forget the bad guy Scar in the movie The Lion King, who kills his brother and exiles his nephew in order to take the throne for himself? And being so power hungry that you will do anything to get your way is one aspect of the shadow lion's ruthlessness, right? And it's not even always ruthlessness, right? And if you think in terms of the executive who loves his family, but he's so caught up in work. He's so caught up in that idea of being that provider that he actually ends up neglecting them, right? So this can be part of the lion archetype as well. And that's a sort of power hungriness that's really, he's got his heart in the right place, but it's like he's not tempering that power drive in a way that benefits his family. Okay, so that's something that you might really need to look out for if lion spirit animal shows up for you. And I'm talking to women too, right? Because especially these days, we all have masculine and feminine within us. So even if you are a woman, if male lion is showing up for you, and if it's resonating as kind of a challenger, look at that. Are you spending so much time with your work or your career that you're neglecting your personal life or your inner life, right? Your inner child. So again, remember that this can be pointing out to an aspect of yourself, or it could be, you could be in danger of falling prey to this kind of behavior in others, or it could point to maybe an over dominating male figure in your childhood. Maybe it was your father or your grandfather or an uncle, something like that, or even a past life. So another interesting and not so pretty lion behavior happens when a new male lion takes over the pride. If he's fought with the existing leader of the pride and won, if there's any cubs present, he will kill them right away. And the females often will stand by and allow it to happen. Then they'll immediately go into estrus so he can breed them and the offspring will be his. Okay. Monstrous. Yeah, it sounds monstrous. And in some ways, like, think about, is something threatening your creative babies or your actual children, right? If lion shows up. But there's actually a couple of light sides to this, okay? It reminds me of the writer's saying, right? Kill your darlings. It means that when we create stuff, we get attached to it, but it's super important to look at the big picture. You could have a sentence or a paragraph or even a whole chapter that are absolutely brilliant. You fall in love with them. You don't want to let them go. But if they're not aligned with the book, it doesn't matter how good they are. If you want your book to succeed and to be the best that it can be, you've got to cut them, right? Kill your darlings. And that's true for other aspects of life as well. We all have things that seemed like a good idea at the time, or maybe served us once, but really aren't supporting the life or the business or the home or what have you that you really want. So lion showing up could be a big message to take a good look at what needs clearing in your life and to be willing to make the sacrifices that need to be made in order to do what's best in the big picture. And finally, another shadow aspect of lion is the aspect of being a lazy bones, right? Male lions are known for lying around doing nothing while the females do all the hunting and then coming in and taking first dibs. Okay, so on the surface, we might see this as a warning against sponging off of others or just not living up to your potential. It can be, but really, let's look deeper. Okay, bear in mind that the lion embodies the king archetype. A king is not supposed to be out there running himself ragged, doing all the things that make the kingdom run. Historically, if you go back to when kings were really kings, he's there to protect the kingdom. He would literally put his life on the line and lead his army into battle. And that's what the lion does. It's an incredibly important function. If anything big shows up to threaten the pride, they have to deal with him first. And he's a very effective protector, and he puts his life at risk doing it. But often just his being there is all it takes for enemies to stay away. Okay, think about this. If he's off expending his energy hunting, then he's not going to have the energy to be there as a protector, and he may not even be present to protect, right? So really looking deeper into things. So that's another spiritual meaning of lion is presence. Don't underestimate the power of presence. One deeply aligned and grounded person in the room can make a huge difference in how people function and get along, even if that person is just sitting there not seeming to do anything, right? If they're an aligned person. So the male lion is a lot like the queen bee in that regard. Both of these spirit animal royalty figures show us that being fully present is just as valuable as hard work, and also that the value of the work you do does not have to be tied to the hours you put into it. So don't be guilty about resting on your laurels and or accepting premium rewards for the value you bring, even if you don't have to work long hours to deliver that value. And I think part of it is like, well, what's my work and what's somebody else's work? And being aware of the role that you play in your family, in your community, in your business or your company, and versus the role that other people play. And what really is your role, what's the value that you're bring and then that you bring, and then seeing what's somebody else's role. And so what if they're not doing your role? Does it really mean that they're not pulling their full weight? It may actually not, right? Take a look at CEOs, like a CEO of a company. He's like the king of the company, right? And it's easy to look at and say, hey, the CEO gets a huge paycheck and he doesn't really do any of the work. It doesn't seem like, right? It's all the people on the assembly lines and things that are actually doing the work to create things. But what would happen if there was no CEO? The company wouldn't have direction, right? So just being aware of value. Now, that's not to say that a lot of CEOs maybe aren't overpaid, right? But the point is that there are different roles. They're equally valuable. I mean, the CEO without the workers would be just as useless, maybe even more so than workers without the CEO. But together, they work together and they create something that is really big and powerful, much more so than any of them could do that on their own. And that's part of the humility of a king, is to recognize that he's an important part of the puzzle, but he's not the whole puzzle. And then finally, there's this idea of the gender differences and the masculine, feminine. This is something that we've already touched on with this video, and we could actually go way deeper into this topic with the lion spirit animal. But rather than creating a super, super long video, what I'm more inclined to do is suggest that if lion is coming up for you, and if you feel like there's a tie with that masculine, feminine, consider studying the law of gender, which is one of the 7 hermetic principles and one of the universal spiritual laws. And that there may actually be a lot of wisdom there for you. And I will be uploading a video on the law of gender within the next couple of months of publishing this video. I'll link it to this video once it's complete. In the meantime, if you're feeling inclined to look into it, there's a lot of information online on the law of gender, and you can also consult with your own higher guidance um, and see where that takes you. Well, let's sum this up. I'm going to give a few keywords for lion. It's the solar archetype, the king archetype, the solar king. Sovereignty, nobility, presence, power, strength, honor, courage, protection, um, the big voice, making yourself heard, authority, law and order, or divine law, divine retribution, right? Justice, loyalty, responsibility, strategy, and sacrifice is sacrifice for the greater good, especially. And then for the lioness, especially, that's cooperation and competition, and that's where the strategy comes in. Shadow side would be pride, negative pride, right? Ruthlessness, which sometimes actually ruthlessness can be positive. Destructive rage, excess and gluttony, and being power hungry, right? So some of these things, it can go both ways. Even destructive rage can serve a purpose. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I know this has been a long video, but there is so much to lion. This is only just the tip of the iceberg. So I really encourage you to if you're at all feeling attracted to this power animal, or that it's got a message for you, feel into what resonates with you. And also, you can work with him yourself, journal with him, paint him, draw him, meditate with him, whatever you feel called to do, because he's going to have messages for you that can really help you in powerful ways. A couple other resources for you that I'd like to share related to lion and to help you connect much more deeply with your spirit animal. Those links will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, you were born to be free.